sameness and a kind of furzy color. It was freezing hard and sharp, with a pierce wind to back it, and I had observed that the holy water froze upon Sir Ensor's coffin. One thing struck me with some surprise, as I made off for our fireside, with a strong determination to heave an ash tree up the chimney place, and that was how the birds were going, rather than flying as they used to fly. All the birds were set in one direction, steadily journeying westward, not with any heat of speed, neither flying far at once, but all, as if on business bound, partly running, partly flying, partly fluttering along. Silently and without voice, neither pricking head nor tail, this movement of the birds went on, even for a week or more. Every kind of thrushes passed us, every kind of wild fowl, even plovers went away, and crows and snipes and woodcocks. And before half the frost was over, all we had in the snowy ditches were hares to tame so we could pet them, partridges that came to hand with a dry noise in their crops, heath poults making cups of snow, and a few poor hopping redwings, flipping in and out the hedge, having lost the power to fly. And all the time their great black eyes, set with gold around them, seemed to look at any man for mercy and for comfort. Annie took a many of them, all that she could find herself, and all the boys would bring her, and she made a great hutch near the fire in the back kitchen chimney place. Here, in spite of our old Betty, who sadly wanted to roast them, Annie kept some 50 birds, with bread and milk and raw chopped meat, and all the seed she could think of, and lumps of rotten apples, placed to tempt them in corners. Some got on, and some died off, and Annie cried for all that died, and buried them under the woodrick. But I do assure you it was a pretty thing to see when she went to them in the morning. There was not a bird but knew her well after one day of comforting, and some would come to her hand and sit, and shut one eye, and look at her. Then she used to stroke their heads, and feel their breasts, and talk to them, and not a bird of them all was there but liked to have it done to him. And I do believe they would eat from her hand things unnatural to them, lest she should be grieved and hurt by not knowing what to do for them. One of them was a noble bird, such as I had never seen before, of very fine bright plumage, and larger than a missel thrush. He was the hardest of all to please, and yet he tried to do his best. I have heard since then from a man who knows all about birds and beasts and fishes, that he must have been a Norwegian bird, called in his country a roller, who never comes to England but in the most tremendous winters. Another little bird there was, whom I longed to welcome home, and protect from enemies, a little bird no native to us, but than any native dearer. But lo, in the very night which followed old Sir Ensor's funeral, such a storm of snow began as never have I heard or read of, neither could have dreamt it. At what time of night it first began is more than I can say, at least from my own knowledge, for we all went to bed soon after supper, being cold and not inclined to talk. At that time the wind was moaning sadly, and the sky as dark as a wood, and the straw in the yard swirling round and round, the cows huddling into the great cow-house, with their chins upon one another. But we, being blinder than they, I suppose, and not having had a great snow for years, made no preparation against the storm, except that the lambing ewes were in shelter. It struck me, as I lay in bed, that we were acting foolishly, for an ancient shepherd had dropped in and taken supper with us, and foretold a heavy fall and great disaster to livestock. He said that he had known a frost beginning, just as this had done, with a black east wind, after days of raw cold fog. And then on the third night of the frost, at this very time of year, to wit on the 15th of December, such a snow set in as killed half of the sheep, and many even of the red deer and the forest ponies. It was 80 years ago, he said. Footnote the frost of 1625. And course he had to remember it, inasmuch as 2 of his toes had been lost by frostnip, while he dug out his sheep on the other side of the Dunkery. Hereupon mother nodded at him, having heard from her father about it, and how 3 men had been frozen to death, and how badly their stockings came off from them. Remembering how the old man looked, and his manner of listening to the wind and shaking his head very ominously when Annie gave him a glass of schnapps, I grew quite uneasy in my bed as the room got colder and colder, and I made up my mind, if it only pleased God not to send the snow till the morning, that every sheep and horse and cow, aye, and even the poultry, should be brought in snug, and with plenty to eat and fodder enough to roast them. Alas, what use of a man's resolves, when they come a day too late, even if they may avail a little, when they are most punctual? In the bitter morning I arose to follow out my purpose, knowing the time from the force of habit, although the room was so dark and grey. A not white light was on the rafters, such as I had never seen before, while all the length of the room was grisly, like the heart of a mouldy oat rick. I went to the window at once, of course, and at first I could not understand what was doing outside of it. It was faced due east, as I may have said, with a walnut tree partly sheltering it, and generally I could see the yard, and the woodrick, and even the church beyond. But now half the lattice was quite blocked up, as if plastered with grey lime, and little fringes like ferns came through where the joining of the lead was, and on the only undarkened part countless dots came swarming, clustering, beating with a soft low sound, then gliding down in a slippery manner, not as drops of rain do, but each distinct from his neighbour. Inside the iron frame, which fitted, not to say too comfortably, and went along stonework, at least a peck of snow had entered, following its own bend and fancy, light as any cobweb. With some trouble and great care, lest the ancient frame should yield, I spread the lattice open, and saw at once that not a moment must be lost to save our stock. All the earth was flat with snow, all the air was thick with snow. More than this no man could see, for all the world was snowing. I shut the window and dressed in haste, and when I entered the kitchen, not even Betty, the earliest of all birds, was there. I raked the ashes together a little, just to see a spark of warmth, and then set forth to find John Fry, Jem Slocum, and Bill Dadds. But this was easier thought than done, for when I opened the courtyard door, I was taken up to my knees at once, and the power of the drifting cloud prevented sight of anything. However, I found my way to the woodrick, and there got hold of a fine ash stake, cut by myself not long ago. With this I ploughed along pretty well, and thundered so hard at John Fry's door that he thought it was the Doones at least, and cocked his blunderbuss out of the window. John was very loath to come down, when he saw the meaning of it, for he valued his life more than anything else, though he tried to make out that his wife was to blame. But I settled his doubts by telling him that I would have him on my shoulder naked, unless he came in 5 minutes. Not that he could do much good, but because the other men would be sure to skulk, if he set them the example. With spades and shovels and pitchforks, and a round of roping, we 4 set forth to dig out the sheep, and the poor things knew that it was high time. End of chapter 41. Recording by Francisca.